All those in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. We have a couple of written communications to the board. Debbie, would you please read those?
There are two. One from Bruce Key, the principal of the high school, two of the Board of School Commissioners, Dr. Richard Brothers, and Mr. David Long. What a great surprise for all of us to be greeted with such a wonderful array of fruit baskets in our faculty room yesterday. We are truly appreciative. Thank you very much, faculty and staff of Rutland High School. And Bruce LG, principal. The next is from Lorraine Crowley and Meredith Budis. Dear Rutland School Board, the staff at the intermediate school wishes to thank you for thinking of us during Staff Appreciation Week. We enjoyed the bountiful fruit baskets and appreciate your recognition of the work we do for our school. Sincerely, the Rutland Intermediate School staff.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for any citizens in the audience who wish to address the board regarding any issues to please identify themselves. Doesn't appear to be anyone. Thank you. And at this time, we have a special presentation to the Russell family, and I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Brothers for the moment. Dr. Brothers, please.
Thank you, Dr. Dick, but I in turn will turn it over to Sharon Crowley, the Director of the Stafford Technical Center. And so, Sharon, if you could come forward, please, and begin the celebration.
Last week we had our Honor Society induction, and I started my comment by saying these are the fun things in our job. And then on Thursday we had our honors program, and I started my comments by saying these are the fun things in my job. And tonight I want to start by saying this is the fun thing in my job, to celebrate some good news and some nice activity that will impact students in their educational program. And I'd like to start by saying welcome to the Russell family. They're here in the second row, and they have made this donation and impact on our program possible, and in a few minutes we'll introduce them. I'd like to read one paragraph which I think in my mind summarizes what this is all about. And it's titled, We Learn by Doing. Not many years ago I began to play the cello. Most people would say that what I'm doing is learning to play the cello. But these words carry into our minds the strange idea that there exist two very different processes, learning to play the cello and playing the cello. They imply that I will do the first until I've completed it, at which point I will stop the first process and begin the second process. In short, I will go on to learning to play until I have learned to play, and then I will begin to play. Of course, this is nonsense. There are not two processes, but one. We learn to do something by doing it. There is no other way. That's by John Holt. The students at Stafford Technical Center are going to learn to produce wood products by doing it, thanks to the generosity of the Russell family. There is no other way to do it. I have the pleasure of introducing David Snyder, our forestry and natural resource instructor, who has also told me he's beginning to develop skills in video production, who will show us some footage of the wood miser saw that was donated to the Technical Center for Instructional Program by the Russell family. David?
Sharon, you're being really generous by saying some videotape. I'll qualify the videotape, and my experience with the videotape industry is limited. Vermont is blessed with natural resources that form the basis of our economy. Our forest resources are in high demand, from foliage tours to ski vacations, maple syrup to summer camping. The residents of Rutland drink a forest resource. The public water supply begins in the heavily forested Wheelerville watershed in Mendon. Hundreds of thousands of recreationalists each year partake in hunting and fishing opportunities that abound in our region. Our wood and lumber products are also in high global demand. The Rutland region's wood products manufacturing economy is highly diversified, with finished lumber, hardwood and softwood plywoods, furniture production, and specialty wood products leading in jobs and incomes generated to the region. From landowner to logger, from trucker to mill, from raw log to finished product, and from sale to final use, The wood product industry forms the second largest manufacturing industry in Vermont. The Forestry and Natural Resources program at the Stafford Tech Center is very grateful to the Russell family for the donation of this wood-binder sawmill. Receiving this state-of-the-art machine will greatly enhance the students' instruction in the following areas outlined in the handouts that I provided each of the board members. With over 25 million people living within a 6-hour drive of Rutland, our forest resources are under tremendous demand. This generous donation will greatly enhance the education of our region's next generation and hopefully assist them in meeting the challenges of the future. Again, I have to qualify this videotape because I'm not used to the idea of teaching with one hand and videotaping with the other. The students this morning and yesterday were able to start learning on the wood-binder, and it's a beautiful machine. So, we've got an 8-foot long diameter. 1.5 inches. And the board footage scale is, say, 40 feet. The sawmill is fully trailerable, which makes it very versatile. We can bring the machine right up into the woods and saw lumber at that time. The machine goes a lot faster. This is only the second day that the students have been operating it, so they're being very, very careful.
That's a good day's work. Inside this shroud or cover is a 1 1/8 inch wide band that has roughly 7 teeth per running inch. And that runs around 2 large wheels that are driven by the engines. And as you can see, it's very well guarded except for the very throat of the sawmill, and we never allow a student in there. Students are wearing earplugs, by the way, as well as safety glasses if they're operating. Oh, I'm sorry. The mill right now is housed down at Mill River Lumber Ltd. in North Clarendon. Mill River has been a big program supporter, and they've been generous enough to house the mill for the last couple months while we got ready to start learning. And they currently employ 3 of my current and/or former students over the last couple of years. So
couple short, very crooked logs. The Wood-Mizer Corporation advertises this mill and all of their mills as being very good yielding mills. They don't produce much sawdust. And at the end of this log, the students tallied up all of the lumber, measured all the boards, used basic mathematics skills, and found that of the 50 board feet of the log scale, we were able to produce 70 board feet of lumber, which is 140% yield. And one of the reasons why is because the thickness of the band is less than half of what the board footage log scales that we use around here accommodate for sawdust. 5.5. Yep. That was the vertical scale or vernier that the mill sets to so that you can determine the thicknesses of the lumber. And this is incredibly accurate. The lumber was within a 32nd of an inch throughout its entire length. And that's, the owners of Mill River Lumber came by later on in the afternoon and asked me whether or not I would leave the keys to the machine so that they could play with it, because they were both, I think they're both on the verge of retiring, and I don't know if they're ready to get out of the sawmill business entirely or not.
So you square up the log and then you're ready to cut the actual lumber that you're using.
The boards that need further edging are put over on the log loader. It's an automatic hydraulically operated log loader that lifts up to a 1-ton log. And those boards will be stacked vertically later on in the process and edged so that you have nice square lumber all the way. What they know about forestry and natural resources at the beginning of the year. And one of the first questions I ask is, where does lumber come from? And they all got it right. Trees. Does anyone know how lumber is produced? And a couple of them have had some prior experience. But a lot of the kids didn't realize that lumber is actually sawn in a lot of different ways from trees, and that each individual tree species has certain characteristics that lend itself or don't lend itself to certain uses. This mill will saw right down to a 1-inch thick board, or also known as through and through sawing, and that's really important because that adds a lot of versatility to the machine as well. And you can see that smooth ending was... I'd like to take a moment to introduce 3 members of my advisory committee that have been extraordinarily helpful throughout this entire process and helping me to become a better teacher. Jim Lawson is a log buyer procurement forester from Rutland Plywood Corporation. David Richards is the Rutland City Forester. The Rutland City Forest is the forestry program's #1 laboratory, and we are really gifted to have 4,000 acres of land in the Rutland City watershed to practice our forestry and natural resources. And finally, Gary Salmon. Gary is our state forester for the Southwest District. Gary has been involved with not only my program, but offering educational opportunities throughout the region, particularly to Rutland High School students. Again, These three gentlemen have been instrumental in helping me become a better teacher and also to institute this sawmilling unit. I'd like to thank them publicly as well.
I have the privilege of making a presentation to the Russell family. And John, if you could come up with your mom and anyone else you want to bring.
I know you will.
How are you?
How are you?
How are you, Jimmy? I've had the privilege, as most of you know, of growing up in this community. And as a matter of fact, not very far from the Russell homestead on Melrose Avenue. Jimmy could probably tell you stories I don't want you to hear. But during that period of growing up, there was never a question. It was always a certainty that John Russell Sr. and the John Russell Corporation were supporters of Rutland and very generous folks. And I have no doubts that John Sr. is watching this and proud of his family. The next generations are continuing to support Rutland and continue to be generous to you and to us. And I'd like to read this plaque that we're presenting to the Russell family. The Rutland Public Schools gratefully acknowledges the John A. Russell family for their generous support of education in the greater Rutland region and their commitment to helping young people become productive adults. Presented on this 14th day of May, 1996. And we'd like to thank you very, very much.
I just may say something briefly. This is something my father wanted to do. Just before he died, he bought this thing, much to my mother's chagrin. She said, why are you buying this saw? And he said, because I'm going to actually make shingles. That was his first, what do you want to do? But it's a pretty remarkable piece of equipment. And when he was real sick, not long before the end, Jack Barrett gave me a call. Because my father had been bugging Jack a lot about logs and this whole process. And Jack said to me, he said, you know, at some point in time, I know your father wants to see this saw go to some productive use. And I said, productive use might be Jimmy and I having fun like the fellows down at the sawmill. And he said, no, that's not what your father had in mind. And I knew that. I knew that's not what my dad had in mind. He really wanted to see this saw go to some use where it could teach kids about the lumber industry. Because as you said, the lumber industry is an extremely important industry to this state. And there's a chance for an awful lot of kids, and there are an awful lot of kids right now that will come out of school that will be able to stay and live here in this great state and work in the lumber industry. So anyways, Jack said to me, he said, if you wanted to donate this, as I know your father would like it to be, the family would like to, he said, I will help set up the program. And as you fellows know, Rutland Plywood, New River Lumber, and a lot of people have given an awful lot of time to help make this happen. We happen to be fortunate to have the piece of equipment with my mom's blessing, Jimmy's, to make the donation. But I just hope a lot of young kids will learn how to use this, get an awful lot out of it. And my only regret is that my father isn't around to kind of coax some of these kids along, because if they think some of you are tough, they have no idea what tough is. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, the chair would entertain a motion that the licensed and non-licensed section of the Personnel Memorandum, number 131, dated May 10th, 1996, be approved as recommended by the Superintendent of Schools.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Wilkinson, seconded by Moran. And I would ask the superintendent to address the memorandum, please.
Thank you, Dr. Dick. The recommendations for tonight's adoption under the license section are the appointment of Darren Spafford, who will be a long-term substitute art instructor at the middle school, replacing Chris Brown for the next school year. And we have the resignations of Amanda Anderson, the occupational therapist in the school district, a maternity leave recommendation for Christina Bachman, a science teacher at the middle school, and then 2 career path appointments for the fourth quarter of this school year, Lee Fort and Dale Smith. They're handling two assignments that were previously going to be undertaken by another staff member, and this is, of course, a properly budgeted item. Then a non-licensed section, the resignation of Evelyn Starros, who's been serving as our Medicaid clerk for about half of the school year. Those are the recommendations for tonight's meeting.
Questions, comments, suggestions regarding the personnel memorandum? If there are none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Dr. Dick, just wanted to mention that Darren Spafford is here, correct? So they can place the name and face.
Welcome aboard, Darren. I wondered who was out there with a tape recorder taking notes. The next item is instructional development. Dr. Brothers.
Thank you again, Dr. Dick. Tonight we're going to spend a fair amount of time discussing the budget for the upcoming school year, because at the next school board meeting, you have to, the Board of School Commissioners has to make a recommendation to be sent over to the mayor. We have been awaiting some results from the State Department, or rather from the legislature, really. We don't have them completely in yet, but we do have some figures to work with tonight. So it's my intention tonight with you to walk you through a series of items to sort of refresh ourselves, bring us up to date on what we've been doing the past several months, and then share some of the current version of the budget with you, and go through some more explanations, and I'll take questions as we go through the process and try to expedite things as smoothly as we can. So I'll be using the overhead over here a great deal tonight, and then I also have handouts of this material that I'll be talking from. So let me proceed over here, and perhaps I could ask Terry. I'm going to have to use that table, Terry. You got it. You can go across the way.
Right at the end of the page.
First, what I'd like to do is just walk us through a little bit of history. Back in February, when we began our first budget discussions, there were a series of items that were mentioned one evening that I just wanted to review with you and talk to you a little bit in terms of how we've been handling the budget process. So that, just to sort of bring us up to date somewhat. One of the things that was discussed or asked about back in February was grade 7 and whether or not what we were going to be able to do to get health maybe into grade 7. We had in fact been able to do that, and health program will be taught to the students in grade 7 this year, and then that will become a permanent part of the grade 7 program in the future, unless it's even thought necessary to move it down further sometime in the future. Next year, it will be taught in grade 7. Same time, we'll also pick up the current 8th grade next year and deliver the program to them. So for that 1 year, we'll be doing it at both grades. That's not going to cost us any additional money at all. We're able to do that because of our Medicaid funds, which I'll speak to in some other places down here. But we have one person coming back off of a leave this year, and she's going to be able to help us in a variety of ways. And this is one of the places helping us to transition down to grade 7. instance of doing that, you've got to do it twice, one in each grade at the same time. If you didn't want to miss a group of kids, mainly the current or next year's 8th graders. Grade 8 and lower foreign language. We don't have the ability to do anything lower than grade 8. We do have the schedules at the high school and the schedule at the middle school poised to do the same thing in foreign language in grade 8 this next year that we've been doing this existing year. If the student loads work out in the high school, we can still use that teacher. This middle school schedule was set up to allow that to happen. So we hope that that piece works out that way. So we're poised to do that as of right now for next year. Pencil sharpness. Pencil sharpness will be provided for in the middle school classrooms in the budget for next year. Health risk survey. The keystone of the health risk of our reaction to and providing programs to help the students, the keystone to this program is the youth center that will be housed in the Southeast School next year. That is not an actual school budget item. That program will be run because of the grant that was just awarded recently to the city school district. On June 11th, we're planning to come back and address some other ways, some other plans, things that we'll be doing that will address this a little bit more fully for you on the meeting on June 11th. English is a program that has been asked for us to pay more attention to at the high school. I can tell you that through additional counseling from the English teachers and from the guidance counselors and administration, a new course that we have up in the high school essentially will be new next year, although the course existed this year, but we didn't really have sign-ups for it. A course called the Writing Process will have several sections running and full enrollments for next year. So we will, in fact, be beefing up the programs in English and especially in the writing process for students at the high school next year. We enlarge our class size by number 6. We are not specifically increasing class sizes in order to reduce our budget or the cost of running the school district next year. But we are taking advantage of anything that we can do to maintain the class sizes that we had this year. This year, our class sizes and our teacher averages were the largest in Rutland County, and we wanted to at least maintain that level, but we certainly didn't want it to increase and go any larger. We have not come across any ways yet to reduce some budget costs because of perhaps grouping some classes together and using a lecture hall. That is possibly a strategy that might be employed sometime in the future, but we haven't reached that point yet. Number 7 is behaviorally challenging students. Those students, as you know, the keystone in this program is going to be the program success being launched at Southeast School next year. That program does result in some savings for us because we won't be contracting out to VAC as we had been planning to do and actually very interested in doing, but we can just do it a little bit more cost effectively ourselves, and that's how we'll be addressing that piece next year. We will be coming back here also and talking to the school commissioners on June 11th about the services we will provide from kindergarten through grade 5. Healthcare and on-site nursing is being provided again through a combination next year of local school district, but also Medicaid funding, which will allow us, as it has this year, to provide more nursing services on site, and in fact allow us also to do more health teaching with our school nurses and hopefully alleviate some costs associated with the teaching of health education classes. Recreation department programming was an idea, a question that we were asked about. We have ongoing arrangements and programs with the rec department for after-school use and during the summer and during the school year, but none of this will actually reduce any of our costs in operating the school district. It will provide additional programs for kids, however, in the city. The 10th one that was asked about, of course, was multi-age expansion. We will be increasing this service this year. Specifically at the Northwest School, we've made some arrangements so that those parents who who specifically asked for the multi-age approach. We're going to be accommodating and meeting their requests at the Northwest School. The Northeast School, we've also been able to meet all the requests, but we didn't have to expand or add classes to the program to do that at the Northeast School. And specifically, it will be expanding with another classroom at Northwest. So that's sort of an update on 10 issues that were raised back in February. I just wanted to speak to you briefly about them as we sort of got back into the budget discussion tonight. Another topic I'd like to just address a little bit is some creative solutions that we arrived at to actually conserve some funds in our budget for this year. First, I'd like to point out that through using one of our school nurse teachers at the high school to pick up some of the health teaching responsibilities, to relieve another teacher doing some physical education work, we've managed to free up one of our driver ed teachers next year to do more driver ed teaching on the road teaching during the school day, and thus saving an amount of money that we'd be spending after school or in the summer to do some of the behind the road work. So that is a very definite way we've helped to ease a little bit of the strain on the school district budget. The career path office. We've had a resignation recently. We're going to reorganize that office, probably relocated in the high school building. The bottom line is that we'll be saving approximately $20,000 through this reorganization, and we don't think we're going to be delivering any less service. We'll be delivering a similar kind of service, but just in a different kind of way, by combining people from the tech school and the high school, and relocating the space so it's a little closer to in between those two facilities. At the intermediate school building, the request was made, and if there was plenty of funds around, we could have easily increased this to 35 classes next year, but we just didn't think that our budget, our finances would allow it. So we've adjusted where some of the classes are, and the fourth grade moving up to fifth grade is going to be taught with one less section. We're going to add a class to the third grade, and we've made the necessary staffing adjustments to accommodate that. Class size will still be reasonable. We'll still meet PSA standards in that building, and we'll just take a little bit of reconfiguration to achieve that goal. The Success Program is the program that we're going to be launching at Southeast next year for those behaviorally challenged youngsters in grades 6 through 12. It's resulting in about that much savings over the cost that we had contracted it out privately. We were just better able to do that because some overhead administrative costs we already have in place. We just didn't have to pay for some of that same cost with the other private organization. So this is certainly a good savings for us. Medicaid funds is kind of a hard one to put an exact number on, but we have taken a great deal of advantage of Medicaid funding to provide services for our kids and try to relieve the strain on the budget. I say it's a hard one to put a number on because we're not supposed to be supplementing, replacing school district services, so we have to be careful with how we handle and account for those funds and those programs. There is definitely still a saving force. Because of everything we've done with the high school, and in fact, even with the middle school, we continue to show increases in tuition students, and next year it should result in about $130,000 more in tuition revenue. We have continued pursuit of grants. David Walker has spoken to you about a number of grants the district has received. I didn't put an exact number in there, but it is in fact, there is a good deal of money that will be flowing in next year helping the school district provide services. But just with the first 6 items, we can identify $325,000 worth of value from different ways we try to reorganize and do things differently for next year. And I wanted to again bring that to your attention before we look at some of the other numbers. Okay, now here's a piece that we'll want to pay a lot of attention to, and I have a handout here for everyone before we before we get into this one. So this one down this side.
Thank you.
Camera. Okay, here's some copies. Okay, this is the cover page on the budget packs that we've been using over the years. This is an updated one. This would actually be, I think, draft number 2 that you've received this budget season. Let me walk you through some of the numbers and show you where some of the differences are. The first number I want to call to your attention is the very first one, which is called state aid. That's the regular general state aid we talk about all the time from the legislature authorizes. So far, right now, from the legislative session, the number as we know it today is $3,110,817. That represents about a $20,000 increase, or 0.66%. That's not even a bump on the log in terms of impacting the cost of running the school system. We think that when the tax department in Montpelier gets finished with their work with the grand lists, and they get all that information over to the Department of Education, if you remember reading in the newspaper, you saw something about the change in how current use is being handled next year. That's vacant land and farmland. There was a couple articles right after the session closed. The bottom line is that they've got to take all the grand lists and figure out how the changes affect the grand lists, get that information over to the Department of Education, where Jerry Casal stands ready to enter that data into his formula system and print out the changes in terms of state aid for us in probably within 2 days. But he's waiting on the tax department before he can do that. When he does that, that means all the new data for population, for enrollments, for transportation will be put into the formula. We hope that the result of that will be favorable and that this state aid number should go up more than $20,000 for the city of Rutland. The massive amount of change taking place up there, there was little hope that they'd get it done by today. And in fact, we knew last week they wouldn't. We hope that they are able to finish it up by late next week. So we'd have it for your final board meeting. This is the conservative figure, and this is the figure that's assured to us, the $3,110,000. But as I said, that's just a very, very tiny bump in state aid, almost inconsequential. The next figure I will just point to is the $95,000 figure, opposite miscellaneous. That figure represents a $50,000 increase. That's income from the Stafford Technical Center budget for purchasing teaching services from the high school. So that's sort of internal paper accounting for us, but that's why that shows a pretty big bump there. The next item, you see a big increase, the secondary tuition. As I mentioned on one of the earlier transparencies, $1,467,000 represents a $130,000 increase in tuitions. Additional students coming next year, basically to the high school, although we do have five of those students at the middle school. The next series of items are pretty much all unfunded, and I'll draw your attention next to the vocational tuition line, which represents $1,146,000 and change. Although that item is high, it's up $166,000. That is actually also, it's a reflection of the new change in the Stafford Technical Program, and although that's an increase in revenue, it's also represented on the expense side of the budget in an equal amount. The next series of items I want to point out are intensive reimbursement, extraordinary reimbursement, and the state block grant. These three items all represent the special education funding. That funding for us for next year represents a small decrease, about $40,000 from where we are this year. It's essentially because we pulled back a number of students from VAC because we're running a program in which we'll be housing those students ourselves next year. But it does represent a small decrease in revenue. But for the size of the amount we're talking about, we're close to being level funded in special education. Title I is a federal program, formerly called Chapter 1. That, in fact, we did have $354,000 last year in budget time. Actually, that number was increased over the summer as we got our allocation. That allocation will stay about the same for this year, so that's really, it's not a real increase. It's really almost level funded with what we got since last summer, since our operational budget went into effect. The lunch program does show an increase over last year. $10,000 of that increase is an increase I'm recommending to you for a small increase in prices for the lunch program, which we haven't done for 4 years. And that's something that we should pick up probably at the next board meeting. The other $20,000 just represents an increase in the income for the program. Unexpended, you see a big jump there. That jump, a lot of it is due to the rebate that we're getting from the Stafford Technical Center from last year's tuition costs. Remember we talked about that a meeting or two ago, and that's where we're representing that income. And then finally, state and federal grants. Although it looks like it shows a jump, it is up somewhat. But don't forget, this one also increased after the budget was adopted last year, so the increase isn't quite as large as it would seem to be. The current receipts from our operational budget last year, including grants, to this year's current receipts is up 3.02%, and that, of course, is without much of an increase up here at home. So we have an increase of 3.02% in revenue to deal with from outside of local sources. Now the total budget that we've been talking about in sessions from February, March, and April. In fact, the last session was the high school session, the first meeting in April. The total budget, we have gotten down to $18,103,311. If you remember back in February, we started out talking about a budget with everyone's request turned down and started out at 18.9. And I told you somewhere early in the sessions that we'd have to come in somewhere between 18 and 18.2 to have a balanced budget for next year. This is the number that we finally gotten down to, 18.1 million. That's a percentage increase over our operational budget, 3.31%. If we let the computer run the numbers, we come out with a tax appropriation request of $8.7 million, 3.62%. We look at the grand list at a very, very modest increase, a nominal increase, and we would come out with a tax rate of, projected at this, 2.59% increase. It's been the superintendent's plan all along to try to come in at a 1.22% increase, which would still mean that that figure that I talked about to you weeks and weeks ago of a gap or a difference or how much further that the superintendent thought we should go is now down to $76,000 that we would have to cut to get down to this level, because this in fact is what you people would like to do. At this point, it was my decision to try to shoot for that as a target. And my decision, my thinking there was to allow the school district some latitude and some maneuvering room next year in building the fifth-year budget to sort of honor that pledge of now 4 years ago. I have some other things to speak about related to this whole budget process. Why don't I just go through this and then perhaps ask you this questions. I just made up a list of unaddressed district needs. I didn't want anyone to think that we were really flush and all our needs were being fulfilled by this budget document tonight. Actually, one of the other personnel changes we've made so far to get where we are in the budget, we do have a resignation of our plumber, and we'll probably, we do have a good chance of filling that internally with one of our people when the job is posted. And if that's what happens, this budget is based upon not filling that position. That drops us down another person in the maintenance bus driver category. This is one need which I think we could still stand to fill to keep our maintenance force up to a minimal kind of level. If we go beyond that, we have a plan to try to keep replacing classroom furniture at the intermediate school, and we would want to do $5,700 worth of tables and chairs to equip maybe 4 more classrooms. Those smaller classrooms, when you put those tables and chairs in, work much better than individual student seating does, when you especially have a smaller type classroom on the bottom floor in this building. Grade 3 and 4 math text, we've had a need there for several years, $17,000 worth approximately. If we wanted to do the whole thing, one fell swoop. Although we have library materials in our budget, they are greatly reduced to where we are this year. All supplies in the $18 million budget are level funded based upon where we are this year. This year is based upon where we were last year. So that would be level funding 3 years in a row. That builds up a lot of demand after a while. This, of course, is one of those demands. This is also one of those demands. And $11,000 would go a big way to helping fill some of those needs. We have some chemistry textbook needs at the high school. We have some band uniform needs that has been talked about around the table before. We have other classroom school equipment needs that could total $143,000 that teachers turned into us way up front in the budget process, and we wanted to try to meet some of them. So I just wanted to point those out to you as things that we haven't addressed in this budget tonight. But I have hard copies of all this information I can pass out later to the board members. So, what is your pleasure? Where do we want to go with this discussion tonight? I do also want to update you on our 3-cent fund in a little while, because that's also related to our program and things that we have to do.
Might I suggest that we do that before we have a real overview of...
More than happy to. Also, one of our past copies of that also. There's some 3-cent receipts. They're coming. That's this. Oh, Bob, give me one more, please. We haven't talked about this fund for a while, but I believe everyone is probably familiar. The 3-cent fund is a special equipment repair replacement fund that is added on to our request from City Hall every year, much like some of the other departments have. And we've been using this. It's been a very important part of our school equipment funding program over the years. This will give you an update of where we are. Obviously, this first column is the fiscal year 95-96 estimate. Is our estimate reasonably close that if we started this year with $246,000 and we spent money, the payments on the Sim Salt, the Apple Lab, and the AS400, the new school bus this year, alumni field track repairs, roof repairs at the middle school. We had expenses of $121,000, and we should end up in June 30th with approximately $124,000 in the 3-cent funds before we go into next year. The next column is the fiscal 96-97 estimate, starting out with, of course, the carryover balance, $124,666. Add the approximate tax appropriation, interest estimated, a total of $338,000 to work with. The SIM software, Apple Lab payment, and the AS400 payment. And by the way, you see here, Bob has put on this sheet the balance that would be remaining after those payments are made.
Is that the balance remaining after 95, 96, or after 96,
96. So, to complete our bond project, the $15 million bond project, we will probably have to draw upon the 3-cent fund for $26,000 more dollars. Actually, that is really not bad in terms of being that close to balancing the books in that whole project over about 3 or 4 years. We're poised and about ready to do that. The problem is getting Wanda down from the State Department. They're growing so short in personnel up there that it's really difficult for them to complete the projects and complete the bookkeeping. But Bob has been pretty much working, I know he's been working closely with Ron, and he and Ron are within just pennies of dollars of agreeing on the total project. So we're in really pretty good shape and really just need a flurry of paperwork to close out the books. We made a commitment to work with the Raider Rooters on the refreshment stand, which is being built up there on the field next to the tech center. It'll commit us to about $18,000 to finish that project and have it ready for next season. There is a slight possibility that the state may not be able to come through with another $24,000. Actually, we've been told that this is eligible, and we've been told that they would pay this to us. This is actually the additional state aid money due because of the 40% funding on that whole project, and there was a handicap project done the summer before that this is the 40% money due on it, and Wanda has told us that we're eligible and that should be forthcoming someday. But it's one of those things that until you see the check, not in the mail, but you see it in your hands, that you encounter for good. So even if that one didn't come and we had to absorb that, it would leave us with a projected balance of $215,000 to use for other things for next year. Let me share with you, as I think you have there in your packet, some of the things that money could be used for. And probably not all of it, because you always want to hold some back for emergencies. Replacing the mini bus, the 14-passenger bus, but replacing it with a little larger vehicle, which would be more utilitarian for us, would cost us about $28,000. We simply have to keep doing that probably once every year to keep that fleet updated. These checks are things that I checked off and would be my recommendations for you to do. Paving the parking lot behind the intermediate school building, $14,500 would just be a tremendous help to the staff and the teachers and the kids and the people who use it for parking. Almost necessary to make the place run much smoother over there. And also keep the buildings cleaner too, a lot cleaner. There's a sewer, oh, excuse me, that is a little adjustment there. Place of the secretary.
You teach David how to do that?
Well, you try out here.
Go cross training.
That's what you get the big bucks for.
And conference or up? Okay, back to the list. There's a sewer manhole in between the two buildings over there, which won't be a big expense, but we have to repair it for $1,250. We have a commitment to the children attending school in that intermediate school building, so I will step foot in the next year unless it's done. Whether I won't be superintendent, but I still won't step foot in it. We have to install a second basketball court for those kids over there. And we also have to put another swing set in, but that is not a high-ticket item at all. This is important. Also, auditorium window blinds. I mean, if you want to do that, but these to me would be four important, very important items. This is a list that Hayden prioritized for us from the different lists that the school buildings gave him. And this was his priority one items to do. You can't do them all.
What are the numbers on the left-hand side?
Over here?
Yes.
Off of the list that came in for the different school buildings, they were just numbers on their list, Bill.
What's the situation on the elevator at the Stafford Tech?
Sharon Crowley?
The controls are not at the lower levels of the handicap requires, that's the change.
But they're working, where it says repair elevator?
I think there's some rebuilding that it should be done. Not in the structure, but in the mechanical aspect.
And where it says replace fire detectors for fire alarm to meet code? It looks like that ought to have a check next to it for me.
Okay, well, that's these things. Everywhere there's an exit door now, you have to put these items in. That could be it. I wouldn't swear to it.
Dr. Brothers?
Yes.
Last year around this time, the chair of the building committee mentioned the windows in the intermediate school, and I can't quote exactly, but I think he said something to the effect that next year at this time we'll be looking at an expenditure for those. I've been in those classrooms, and it seems to me that they are a priority that was costing us money, fuel money, going out the windows literally, and I'm just surprised that that's not up there somewhere.
I do have those on some other pages of Hayden, so I did not include that in your list, but I can get that for you very easily. That's a very, very high cost item on ticket, and I pulled this list off. This seemed to be the ones that were attainable within the funds that we had available.
I believe that, if I remember right, that was around a $130,000 ticket to do all of those windows. You're right, something definitely needs to be done. It's something that, with the cutbacks in state aid, out of the operating budget and whatever, I think it's something we may want to look at, is starting to do a couple classrooms a year. That may be the only way we're going to be able to do this, is to eat this elephant piece at a time.
Pick the worst ones, maybe the warmest ones in the hot weather. Also hoping that we could see reasonably soon a sale of your Lincoln building. Reasonable could be a year or more, but proceeds and something like that could be poured into that type of work. So?
The one item on here that I had a question about was what the thinking was on a success program for the intermediate school, and whether or not that was going to happen next year, or whether or not it was going to be delayed by a year.
We have some plans to serve the intermediate school, Bill, and we'll be talking to you about those on June 11th. Essentially, we're going to take one of the classrooms and turn it into a resource, to a self-contained center with a special educator assigned to it so that we can handle the students in grades 3, 4, and 5 in that space when necessary.
And is that going to create any additional cost that we don't have in the budget?
No. No, that's staffing is accounted for in this budget that we presented to you tonight.
Is there? Okay.
So I'm open for questions or discussions or comments. Anything else that I can share with you tonight? Anything else I can bring back to you next week or get to you before, next week or 2 weeks? 2 weeks from tonight would be the time we have to set the budget for next year.
Questions, comments? John?
I'd just kind of like to make the comment that I realize we like to hang our hat on the fact that we have $1.25 and we told the citizens of Rutland that we were going to make that last for 5 years. I think we have to keep in mind that that doesn't mean that at the end of 5 years we're going to be able to go back to these people and say, hey, we want another nickel. So I think we've got to be very easygoing on where we spend our money, because at the end of 5 years we might not get another penny to spend, and then we're really going to have to start cutting because there are certain costs that are going to go up. So I think it's important that we keep that in the back of our minds as we set this budget. Because I think you told us, Bob, that it's about $50,000 to $60,000 a year increase in salaries from one year to the next.
That's just a step.
That's just a step increment. So I mean, at some point in time, if we butt up against $1.25, we're going to start cutting because we aren't going to get the money to replace them.
The major forces pushing your budget up this year, as minimally as it is, are your wage costs. The total school district budget is around $10 million. On average, including step increases and other contracted increases, we're probably looking at 2.83% increases there. Your health insurance program went up 9.8% this year. Last year we got by with a very, very small increase. Your utility and other types of costs are probably going to be somewhere between 5 and 7%. And altogether, those things are pushing up. It's about 3 point something there overall that I'm looking at.
So at some point in time, we're going to run up against that $1.25, and then we're going to have to get the axe out again.
That's 3%, the 3% salary increase across the board, how it balances off. That's 3% of 10 million, which is a $300,000 bump in the budget right at the start.
But if the grand list were to go up, then we might not have to ask for more money, right?
We have not seen in these times any real significant growth in the grand list over the last 4 or 5 years now.
I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to pat ourselves on the back for being able to stay within the $1.25 in 5 years. By the same token, I think we have to look at it realistically. And I know myself, when we agreed on the $1.25 in 5 years as our goal and our target, we had planned on reasonable increases in the grand list. We had also projected out where we would be on the state formula, knowing how the formula was working. The grand list has not increased, only slightly in the last few years. And with the hit of basically flat state aid this year increase, where we were planning on $300,000 to $400,000 this year, and then another $300,000 to $400,000 next year on top of that, I think we have done very well as a school board and as a administration to reprioritize and do what we need to do. So I agree with you, John. We've got to watch it, and there are no guarantees. But by the same token, we have really had to play it very close to the chest with the things that haven't come through that we were planning on.
Just for my edification, the ward of the state money that they charge back, when it says the fiscal 95-96 budget, $3,090,000 in state aid, we didn't really get $3,090,000, did we? Didn't they deduct?
They deducted the bill that we had to pay, but
which was roughly...
They did deduct about $50,000 from the state aid we received for an expense item. We budgeted next year $20,000 on the expense side for state aid payments for next year. Could be more, could be less. I think last year we budgeted $20,000. It was a lot more. But that's just a roll of the dice, and we do the best we can in balancing all the priorities in the budget. As I said at the opening here, I hope that, all the factors that we have submitted, all our recent data representing Rutland City Schools should result in more state aid coming to us. It's a question of how much. I sincerely hope it's at least $76,000, which takes care of that problem and where we could get down to what I was planning to get down to. But in the end, this is your call, commissioners, and exactly what you want to do with it. Obviously, we have to wait on that answer probably for another week, 7 or 8 days.
What's the date of when we have to approach the mayor with our budget report?
June 1.
June 1.
Essentially, your next school board meeting, which is the 28th of May.
Will that data be available by the 28th of May?
We've been given assurances that it will be. That's all we can tell you. The folks up there seem to think it will be. And so that's all we can say. It is a massive change that they initiated at the last minute with the grand list of every community in the state. And that's what's taking their time in the tax department.
I would suggest that we hold until next week, the next board meeting. I would like to see us stay at the $1.22.5. However, if the money doesn't come through, we've got a fairly tight budget as it is, and rather than making a decision when we may be able to keep our budget intact and still stay at the $1.22.5 if that money comes through, if we have the latitude to make a decision at the next board meeting.
That was the intent. This is not, it was not intended,
Okay.
unless it was the desire of the board, that any action be taken. This is a working discussion with final action being held out as long as we can, meaning the 4th Tuesday in May, when hopefully even more information is available to us. Madeline?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, can you tell me if in your salary figures it includes funding for there to be someone in the guidance office? I don't mean a secretary, I mean a guidance counselor in the guidance office during the summer.
Not to the degree it has been the past summer or two, no.
And so when would guidance counselors be available?
We would have one person available, I believe, most of the time, or for 4 weeks. 4 weeks.
And that includes the time immediately after school and immediately before school?
Well, there would be time that the principal would have to allocate and use, and then we have some days that we could assign some other counselors up there, but we don't have the amount of time that we had counselor use the past 2 summers. We cut back on that drastically.
My concern is with the number of students we have going into the high school and the number of things that occur after exams are taken and students trying to get help applying to colleges or seeking some kind of help on what they're going to do after they get out of high school, particularly seniors. And given the fact that guidance counselors still teach the career paths, that our students are not getting the kind of guidance services they need. And if you have to make schedule changes and do all those changes once you begin school, then you're missing time out of classes. And I really felt that that was a problem last summer. And
Yeah, it was. A lot of guidance time last summer, Madeline.
I just know from my own experience the number of times that I called the guidance office that when there was no counselor available. And I just think we need to look at that service because once the school year starts, particularly for seniors, I'm concerned that the availability of time isn't there to perhaps lead them in the direction they need and to make the kind of selections they need with colleges. So if there's only going to be a limited time available, then I would ask that, the high school administration look at that and see what's available for students, because I think that's very important.
Well, Mr. P is here, I'm sure he'll can do.
And then I have one other thing. It's a small thing, but I know there's at least one high school classroom that has desks in it that are perhaps for intermediate schools or intermediate school students. And to ask our football players or our athletes, students who, you know, or any student, people large like me, to fit in those desks is ridiculous. And so I don't think we're talking tens of thousands of dollars there, but I do think the desks at the high school should at least be able to accommodate the students that are going to be sitting in them.
I know the room they're talking about. I thought we had made some attempts to replace it with some different furniture, but I'll go check that out.
We did.
We did? Okay.
Well, my understanding was we didn't, but perhaps it happened. No, I didn't. Okay. Thank you.
Bill?
Are there any other sources of funds for the unaddressed district needs that you've got listed here? In other words, we have a blank line for grants. We have unaddressed district needs. Are there any other possibilities that we're looking at for other sources of funds that can help us on the tables and the chairs? Madeline talks about the band uniforms. I seem to be more concerned about math techs, chemistry techs in a library.
Well, there are, of course, always fundraising possibilities. And by the way, why I mentioned fundraising, I'll simply also announce that we put into place this process we set up last fall, where everyone anticipating to do a large-scale fundraising, which is $500 or more, outside of the school building. We send up those applications, and people are being asked to sign up and send them back to us so we can set that schedule up for next school year, before school ends this year. But there are other fundraising possibilities to tackle something like band uniforms, but at the present moment, Bill, I don't have any quick answer for you and any other solution for these things.
Furniture doesn't fit anyway underneath the 3 cent fund.
It can. We have done that before.
Replacement furniture.
So the tables and chairs can potentially...
We have done some of
the
this.
3 cent fund?
Because that's capital equipment.
That's all. Okay. And when we talk about other classroom school equipment,
There was a long list of different items that different people were asking for around the school district when I started this process in January, actually December. Many pieces are like computer equipment or modems, things that are related to computers. But some of the equipment is other classroom equipment, and we could, but a lot of it would not be the kind of equipment you would define as capital equipment under our 3 cent fund.
well, if there is any capital equipment that's on a needs list, I would like to see that as we sort of try to figure out how to spend our 3 cent fund and what options are available. Because I do think that the Lincoln money, we should kind of earmark and look at the windows and some critical items for capital expenditure and not try to take it out of what I consider our operational 3 cent fund.
The decisions on what you want to do with your 3 cent money don't have to be made in 2 weeks. You simply make that request of the mayor to raise the money. You can make those decisions later, over the summer, and next school year.
Do you know the copyright date of the math text and the chemistry text we're currently using?
I heard it said around this table that the chemistry text may be copyrighted prior to the age of the students using them.
Chemistry.
I cannot say anything about the math texts. I know they're old. We don't use them anymore.
You don't use them, what are they using?
They're using materials that they're preparing from the different workshops they've been attending about the newer ways to teach math.
There are no math texts for third and fourth grade.
That's correct. They use all handout material.
And you can't use...
And listen, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that either. There's a lot of value in doing that. But there's also some value in having a certain number of books around as backbone to the program too.
Go ahead, Jim. You're not looking to outfit every classroom with texts, it's primarily to have, is that available? Is that,
$17,000 would provide books to every classroom, that's good rate.
and that's even based on the new math?
Well, these would be the new books that are printed and published and designed in the new ways that mathematics is taught today.
Could we possibly, again, taking this a little bit at a time, buy math books, say, for a quarter or a third of the third and fourth grade, and schedule to where the teachers could share the books, and not all be teaching math at the same time? And then the newer math books would be available, and then maybe some of the savings we'd have in the time, the cost of running copies for handouts might be saved to where we could sort of offset it and instead of doing the whole thing at once.
In fact, at the fourth grade level, we do that now, because our teachers are confident, and one teacher's addressing the whole language arts area and spelling and reading and writing. The other one's doing math, so they're already carrying these outdated books on that basis, because umpteen books are falling apart. But the issue becomes then when a child wants to take a book home, and the parent wants to help at home, and you can't say, well, we're only going to do math homework for half of you tonight. I think over the last several years, faculty has done a lot of work in studying NCTM standards and getting samples of textbooks from all different companies and drawing from those to create a curriculum. But I think we're reaching a point of exasperation because we're asking them not only to teach, but to create all the materials.
Frankly,
we're ready.
I think it's ridiculous for a district of this size and hopefully this sophistication not to have math texts for third and fourth grade. I, for one, would like to see that back in the budget.
Can I also offer, I certainly don't have a recommendation to make until we get more information. The last thing I want to do as a board member is be in a position in a year or two or three and having to reduce positions and staff to meet our charter limit, whatever it may be. Right now it's $1.25. On the other hand, the balance of that responsibility, if there are supplies, materials, and texts that become a one-time purchase, in other words, if we purchase them when the funds are available, we're not going to come back next year, the second year, or the third year being required to expend it again. If we don't spend it this year, if we need it, and that's where we have to balance the needs, and to balance the needs of the taxpayers as well. But if we don't spend it this year, and we try to chunk it down, and our plan is to do a third, a third, and a third, on the surface, that's reasonable. But if we don't have the funds in the second and third year, have we really accomplished our goal, or are we actually worse off than if we had not started in the first place?
You're worse off because the textbook might not be available in the third year, because they might have gone to a new edition.
Well, my point, and the only point that I make at this point, is to suggest to the board that we keep our options open and think in those terms as we head into final decisions a couple of weeks from now. This is no time to make definitive statements because we do not have the state aid figures in place.
I'd like to say from a philosophical point of view, I believe that we need to buy the math text and the chemistry text, that the expenditure of $29,000 for those books is critical and needs to be in our budget. And we can look at what state aid does, but if I take a look at that, I don't think we can cut it any longer.
I agree with both Bill and Michael. And one of the options that we do have is that $28,000 or $29,000 is about 0.45 cents on the tax. The money is available this year. It is a one-time expenditure where we buy them this year. We aren't going to be back looking for those textbooks again next year. So it is a one-time expenditure that does not, like adding a person where you have them next year with their salary increases and whatever is there forever. This is kind of a one-time expenditure, and it's something that I think we ought to strongly consider also.
Is there a formula or guideline or criteria after X number of years or when they're dated, then we need to be looking at it? Because it's hard for me to believe that there's only 2 areas in this whole entire district that we need to tax. Like, I mean,
That isn't the only 2 areas. I would simply point those out there, the 2 most critical in terms of aid.
well, it seems to me then, if this board's going to be proactive, you need to be looking at some kind of expenditure every year and begin replacing that. I mean, I just sort of feel like these 2 are screaming the loudest this year, and we need to be looking at if that's in fact the direction that staff believe we need to do in replacing text. I'm assuming that technology can't replace a book every year, or books to that degree. It feels to me like some subject areas don't necessarily need current text all the time. I don't know. I've also heard stories to the fact that once you buy the text, it's already outdated. I don't know. I have to trust the pro.
Madeline?
I have a question, though, on the texts. I agree that we need to buy them, but I also believe if we're in the middle of doing this K-12 curriculum, that whatever texts we buy fit in to the way we're going to be teaching math, K-12. Chemistry is primarily taught in the high school, but certainly with math, I wouldn't want it to be something that it's just unique to the intermediate school and then the approach changes when you get to the middle school. And the question I would ask is, can you use any of what used to be Eisenhower money for textbooks?
Some use it for previously math, science, technology, professional development. Now, as I mentioned at the last meeting, in response to your question, we can use it for any area, but only in terms of professional development. And they're very careful about the ways in which we can purchase supplies. They really audit that carefully. The rules changed about 3 or 4 years ago.
And then the other thing would be with regard to the library. I know I should know this. Title IV doesn't exist anymore, right? Or whatever it used to be able to get library books out of.
No,
Okay.
that's phased out a few years ago.
But those dollars are available in another federal program. I don't know whether it used to be Chapter 2, and then it went to Title something. And when they did that, it gave districts a lot of leeway in how to use that money, whereas part of it used to pretty much be marked for the library. So I would like you to look into whatever that federal grant was and see if we can, this year, use it for some intermediate school library books.
It was used in a past year for tax supplies equipment at the school level, but we're only talking about $2,000 or $3,000 per school. Based upon student enrollment, might have been $3,000 or $4,000 at the 2 largest schools.
But we've used it for things like projector bulbs and paper and things like that, when I would like to see it be used for materials to support the curriculum and those things that are necessary to maintain what we presently have come out of regular budgeted funds. And, I mean, I know it's not a lot of grant money, but it would seem to me something that we could look at.
Cheryl?
I've got a couple of questions. One is on the capital fund. I thought that I remembered, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the capital fund was used for replacing or renovating existing buildings or replacing existing supplies. If that's the case, how can the refreshment stand, equipment. How can the refreshment stand be included in the capital fund expenses?
It's capital equipment that we're in a sense, refurbishing equipment that one of your organizations has been using for years and years to conduct their fundraising up there. And we're converting from a mobile equipment structure that they used to drive up and park, and it's practically outdated and unusable anymore, so we're building a permanent installation with their help instead. I think it can be defined, the definition can include it, Cheryl. I don't see any problem with it at all.
And,
I don't even think it's a stretch at all compared to.
We should probably add that the Raider Rooters have pledged an $18,000 match to finish that building.
really.
Oh, yeah, important.
And also, I picked up the Rutland Tribune this past Friday because the headline said, "School board vows only 2.47% increase." Well, as I read on, it indicated that the school board they were talking about was the Proctor School Board. And the sentence that raised some questions in my mind in the article, although I recognize that you can't always believe everything that you read, says Webster, which would be the superintendent, Donald Webster, for that system, negotiated a deal with the Rutland City School System, so most of the increased cost would be delayed for a year. Now, this is in reference to tuition for the Stafford Technical Center. Proctor will only have to pay an estimated $11,494 extra this year, an increase of 24%. And I guess the questions that come up relative to this is, are the Rutland City taxpayers somehow subsidizing a loan essentially to Proctor, and would there be some lost interest potential?
If there's any kind of loan at all, it would be a one-day loan, because we worked out with Don, who was having a lot of trouble fitting it into his budget to this, pay for students in the all-day programming. And by the way, I've got to give a lot of credit to those two school districts, Proctor and West Rutland. I think not only met their quota, they may have exceeded it by a couple students for this new program. But what we did with the request of, well, he's the only superintendent that's really asked to do it, is to allow them to pay for, I think, 4 or 5 students July 1st, like 1997. So the receivable would fall into the following year, but bookkeeping-wise, we can set it up as a receivable for next year. And we talked to the accountants about that, so it's at the worst case, it's a one-day's loss of maybe some interest money.
One day, are those payments?
July 1st,
Those
97.
payments would have been due on the regular payment
June
schedule?
30th.
Sometime during next school year.
June 30th, thank you.
Sometime in June. So they're postponing the June payment until July 1.
To the next year's budget.
For them. But for us, we can handle it accounting-wise as a receivable for the next fiscal year.
So the Stafford Technical Center students who had been, well, we're talking about all-year programming now. The sending districts would be making a final payment after those students had already graduated? They
No.
aren't prepaid?
Well, this is, in this one case, these 4 kids that we agreed to help them out, and it would be like for one day. Cut the check to us the first day of the next year.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I guess that it's not answering my question. Does that mean that there will be students that will be finished with the program prior to that tuition payment being received?
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay.
Does that happen now?
Yes, it does.
It currently does happen?
Does that happen in terms of regular?
Regular tuition and private tuition. We have some receivables, but if they don't pay us in July or August.
There has been a bone of contention in
Well,
many times.
Yeah, I thought that there had been a different procedure that had been passed several years ago that
we will
looked for a
bill
quicker
interest
collection.
for those districts that are late.
Okay. Okay, so for those other districts, we charge interest on, but for Proctor, we won't be charging that interest for that late payment.
For that small amount, it wouldn't be worth our trouble.
But that would be available to any, if any of the sending schools to the technical center felt in order to meet the obligation that they said when we agreed on having on the number of students at the technical center so that we could set the tuition rate. If any of them found that they needed that one day in order to help meet that so that we wouldn't have to raise the tuition, we would do that. It's not just something that would be available to Providence.
No, but it's a pretty minuscule thing to ask to add 4 students to your tuition.
What?
Because
It's a pretty small thing to ask of a district to do that in order to add 4 students to your tuition and make it affordable to another district. The income we receive from it by far outweighs the cost that might be incurred from any system.
It also seemed to be a way to
Good
help,
business decision.
to help make the system run, too.
And it became an issue because we did not decide to make this a full-day program
So
until...
like November, December of this past
And
year.
actually, we didn't vote on it till later than that, and so that districts had no opportunity to build that into their own budgets, and they didn't have a choice in terms of, well, we just want to send the kids half days.
And this is only a one-year thing. This is not something that's going to happen every year.
Just to get over the hurdle.
Anything else on the budget discussion this evening? If people have questions or comments or suggestions, please get them to Dr. Brothers prior to the next board meeting if there's any additional information you need or want, because I would expect that the board will vote on a budget amount to send to the mayor at our next meeting in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you. Move on? Yes, please.
The next item is for Bruce to report and update you on the jam plan survey results.
It seemed appropriate with the snow flurries in the air from last week that we go back to discussing Jam Plan one more time. The process has continued since the end of January when Jam Plan 96 was completed. The next part of the process was our surveys. We surveyed our student body as well as sending out 900 surveys to our parents and to our staff. And what you have in your hands is the results of those surveys. We tried to be as inclusive as possible. The first part of the surveys was basically a scale of 1 to 5 and dealt with satisfaction as far as course offerings, satisfaction with the quality of the classes, the satisfaction with the honors pass-fail rating system, overall satisfaction with Jam Plan, and a discussion on remedials. And then asking them how they felt that the Jam Plan fit into their students or their years as far as the teachers went, and then asking them outright for suggestions, comments on Jam Plan. And what you have there are the results. We had 662 student responses. The majority of the suggestions for improvement of Jam Plans from the students was more choices, different choices. 10% didn't want Jam Plan again. Others wanted shorter classes, and a 14% wanted to keep it the same. Others wanted longer Jam Plans. So it ran the gamut from excited about what their choices were, pleased with it, to wanting more choices, to not wanting choices at all. And it ran pretty much true to form with each of the surveys as we went through them. I was pleased with the response from the parents. Although we only received 106 responses, they were very pointed in what they were looking for. When we looked at what they'd like to see in next year's Jam Plan, more academic programs, computer courses, and then there's a list of a number of different areas they also looked at as possibilities. One of the key questions for the Jam Plan Committee in looking at all this was, once we had gone through all the information, was to making some decisions in regards to next year.
one of the key questions that we looked at was, in what way do you think your children benefited from Jam Plan? 33 of the parents that responded made statements, provided students with exploratory opportunities that might not have otherwise occurred, provided training or experience for a possible career. It was a nice break for kids. We had 10 that made the comment that it really didn't benefit their child at all. Other part of it, how do you feel Jam Plan fits into your child's year-long classes, and what effect does it have on your child's learning throughout the rest of the year? 23 of our parents said it was a nice break and it adds vitality. We had 17 that said it didn't fit in and felt it was a negative effect. And then we had 13 that said it offers a unique learning opportunity, in-depth study, and broadens horizons. And there were a variety of other responses. What we then did in going through all of the responses was to, as the Jam Plan Committee, was to then look at what adjustments we could make to make Jam Plan 97 more effective. And changes that we made, number one, we decided the Jam Plan Committee, which basically at this point involves the work of 15 staff members, myself as an administrator and 14 teachers, we decided that we should have some student input into the Jam Plan, on the Jam Plan Committee. So it was our decision that we would get 2 members of the student body. We were looking probably at a member of the junior and senior class, and because we want it to be serious, because they feel it's very serious, we're going to go through an application process and ask the students to do an application, as well as some maybe a short paragraph on the reason why they want to be involved, and to go through an interview process. We also looked at shortening Jam Plan to 3 weeks this coming year, to the chagrin of Kathy Archer, because we will be trying to also do a musical next year. And as we speak, she's already gotten the word out to students that are interested in becoming a part of the musical, that they need to be seriously thinking about it and meet and talk with her prior to leaving school this year. One of the key areas that the Jam Plan Committee focused on was the need for more emphasis on academics. That came through in a number of situations from our surveys. One of the things that the Jam Plan Committee will do is that we are going to have each of the faculty do their proposals to the Jam Plan Committee, which will include specific goals and objectives for the class and for the students, which will be reviewed by the Jam Plan Committee for approval. The form for Jam Plan, their proposals will actually go to them right about the time they leave for summer vacation, and it'll be due back to us early September. The whole idea we want to do is to move Jam Plan. Each year we've moved it up in time. We're actually going to start Jam Plan in September this year, as far as setting up the process as far as proposals and moving it forward. The whole timeline will look something like this, with the faculty getting their proposals to us in early to mid-September. In October, the month of October will be basically set aside for students looking at the school to work. We want to have that all tied together and placements done by November 1st. And then by November 15th, because those students will have been placed, students will know whether they need to look for enrichment courses through the Jam Plan. And what we'll probably do, or we're planning on doing at this point in time, is around the 15th of November, actually set up arena scheduling. So within probably 2 days of the 15th, students will all be scheduled for Jam Plan. So there'll be no questions in regards to what they'll be taking. There will be the question of do they have their school to work placement or anything like that. So we're adjusting in those areas. Some of the other things that we've discussed and are going to make modifications to. One was the school to work. We had a lot of discussion and concerns on the part of a number of different people from all 3 areas, talking about the school to work and feeling that perhaps it's not ideal for freshmen to go out on the school to work. Although there were some great opportunities for kids and some students did an outstanding job, really started to feel that, and the committee felt that perhaps we should look at limiting the school to work to 10, 11, and 12. And then within that 10, 11, and 12, perhaps we should look at not allowing students out to go out more than school to work more than perhaps 2 times in the 3 years that they would have that opportunity. And I realize that we're going to have to grandfather that for those students that have begun now, because it wouldn't be fair to them in that regard. One of the other things that the site supervisors in the community suggested, and we feel very strongly about, was more of an application interview process for the school-to-work placements. That if you're an employer and you want a student to come to be with you, whether it be a veterinarian or doctor or lawyer, whomever, that student will go through an application process, will go through an interview, so that they have the sense of this is really the way it works when you're seeking a job, and that employer will have a better idea exactly what that student brings to the table before they get there. And I think that we think that that's a very important part. The other piece is that we want to clarify the whole school-to-work process. We've moved it up in time. We want to make sure we spend time, and that's the only focus we have for that month of October, so that once that's finished, there's clarity and there's finality to it. So, questions? Yes.
Certainly, if you aren't going to allow the freshmen to go out into the community and work, then you have to set up some process that they don't get what's left over.
Absolutely. That was one of the,
out of
right, exactly. It's one of the things that we feel is very important, that we have to look at the courses we're offering and make sure that there's a process, as you say, that the freshmen aren't going to get last dibs on everything, that we have process up, that they will get the quality courses like the upperclassmen as we go through.
Well, certainly understanding that there is a filtering down effect, and as you work your way up, you're going to get into the really good classes, but it's going to be...
Even this year, we tried to adjust that in that we had everyone go through their first selection initially, and then started the process again. So it was seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, so they all got their first choice, and then started the second round with seniors, juniors, sophomore, freshmen, because that was one of the biggest concerns we had the first year we did it. So we did take that into consideration even this year as we went through the process. That's
a couple of questions. Could you tell me who's on the Jam Plan Committee?
Top of my head?
Well, if not on the top of your head, you can send it to me.
Okay, I can get you a list of them.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a problem.
And then the other question I had, what about advanced placement and pay setter courses? Are you going to continue to teach pay setter during Jam Plan?
It would be our intent that we would work it in as we did this year in the slots, either before or after the enrichment courses, in the so-called remedial slots. We had the Jam Plan and the AP courses running during those periods of time.
But not all the AP courses ran?
No, not all. English did not.
History did not. Biology did not.
Right. But the AP biology, those students were still working on a sizable project during that period of time. I know for a fact.
But their teacher wasn't here.
Right.
So all AP courses then will run something during Jam Plan?
I'm not going to make a commitment to that until I let talk to the AP teachers in regards to what they feel would be appropriate.
Oh, no, I guess I need to comment on that.
Sure.
Because I don't care how good our teachers are. The AP exam is given in May. And I've been through this twice now as a parent of an AP student. And there are whole chunks of material that are on the AP exam that are not covered in class. And if you're going to ask parents to pay for these tests and ask students to put forth the kind of work that they need to put forth to do that, to me, you need to be upfront with parents and say, this is what the AP exam is going to include, because the AP does tell you what percentage of different topics are covered. These are the areas we're going to cover in class, and these are the areas we need to somehow find a way to acquaint your students with, because the teachers who teach AP courses are excellent teachers, and I don't mean to in any way say that they're not, but no matter how you cut it, you can only do so much between September and January. And I don't believe that it is unique to one class or the other. You know, that biology is covered or chemistry is covered and history isn't or anything like that. But I will say that my experience has been that there are whole chunks not on the exam. And somehow I believe we have an obligation to make sure students get that material.
Madam, how about the suggestion at the beginning of the AP course, the student is given a syllabus covering the blocks that will be taught by the teacher, and the blocks will be their own responsibility to pick up for knowledge.
I have no problem with that, but I do feel that we need to address that. And if we are going to give AP credit for it, then the College Board needs to know what we're doing also.
I know that in at least one area of the AP courses, one of the instructors has had review sessions pretty extensively over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe even more than that. So there is extra time that's been put in by a number of them outside of AP Calculus. I know that was one of the ones that ran during Jan Plan, some of the other courses. So I think that they try to address as much as they possibly can. We will look into it. Other questions, Bill?
The only thing I would say, getting some feedback from some kids, is that I think we need to be careful that there aren't some, what we used to call gut courses, that are just coasters and they're dead time. A lot of the programs are fantastic and were creative and were a real asset. Some of the feedback on a couple of them were just coasters. And I would hope that as we progress, we can eliminate those, because I think that the opportunity for the teaching options to be more demanding instead of less demanding is really what ought to be there, and it shouldn't be viewed as a nice break. It'd be a nice change of pace, but a nice break is not something that makes me feel real good about the academic challenge.
The Jan Plan Committee also felt strongly about that, and that was why we decided that we would put in the proposal process for the staff, that it closely scrutinized those, with the idea that we really needed to start doing some weeding out this year and look at goals and objectives and make sure that those goals and objectives meet reasonable standards.
Bruce, there are 3 or 4 spots here where we had people who were unhappy with it. And 2 things. I wondered if there was any possibility of knowing which areas those kids were in where the parents were not happy with the program, or specifically what courses they were in.
It's an anonymous survey.
But when we do the survey, they don't have to put their name on, but if they would say
what the area is,
was,
right?
Because and as I said before, when we got into this at the beginning of the year, my biggest concern is the academic component and the continued educational experience, along with the break and change.
Mm-hmm.
And having gone through a couple of Januaries of this in college, the college kid is even more adept, I think, at dodging the issue of work, and will work harder not to work than they will to do the job. The areas, I think, are small numbers, but are still something that I think should be addressed. And if we could find out when we do the thing as to what areas the kids were in when the parents were dissatisfied, and nail down those areas, not necessarily the kid or the parent or anybody else, to find the problem.
One way which would help is that you let us
Hang on 1 second, David.
You could flip that tape over.
She's got them labeled.
Oh.
I decided not to flip it over. It's one of the simplest way possible to have a military recorder.
Tape 3. I can tell her anything, right?
David?
Well, I was just going to say that if you have identified the coasters, I think the word you used, Bill, it would be very helpful if you could identify those to Bruce, and I'd be interested to know what they are too.
I'll get them.
And what might be a coaster for one student might be a challenge for another.
Yeah, it would help us to know,
Right.
you know, even if it is a minority, to know what you're talking about.
Well, simply on any questionnaire or survey, it's what coursework did your child enroll in this Jan Plan? And that's not going to identify a parent, but it's certainly going to identify the course that you're responding to. And do we do evaluations as a rule for coursework anyway? In terms of was the student satisfied with the course?
Individual teachers will do that, but overall, no, I don't think there is a...
Maybe something we want to take a look at as well.
John?
I had a question about a number of, do you have teachers now that have not taught at all in Jan Plan? You've had it for 2 years. Are there teachers that have...
No. They're required to submit 2 proposals, If one of the proposals doesn't go, they're still teaching another. This year we had a couple of teachers that, had taught last year, didn't end up this year, but ended up doing supervision, ended up teaching remedials as well as supervision. Everyone always teaches, whether it's either jam plan or remedials, or a combination thereof.
I would be interested in knowing, though, are there any teachers who did not teach a traditional jam plan course? In other words, in that 3-hour block? As opposed to supervising...
For the last 2 years?
Or remedial?
Seems to me that there's more work that goes into setting up this course than it does to go into supervising. And I'd be a little bit concerned that there might be some teachers who would rather do the supervision because it's going to be less work. Maybe there's none there, and maybe I'm all wet, but if I am, I apologize if I'm not.
We've kept that in the back of our minds while we've gone through the process. Other questions?
I have a question on something that's not on Jan Plan. So when you're done with Jan Plan, I could do it now, or I could do it under new business, which is what I was going to do.
New business. Okay, thank you, Bruce, very much.
I don't need to.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Brothers.
Thank you again. The last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and as you heard from a couple of letters, the school commissioners were thanked by the faculties all around the school district, and they were quite surprised. It was a very delightful little award or appreciation, a little token. Once again, there's just too many open houses and announcements to talk about with the coming of the closing of the school year coming on rather fast. So, just encouraging parents to pay attention to the newsletters brought home by the children because they're chock full of end-of-year activities. I spoke about the fundraiser application earlier, so I won't mention that again. Moving into the printed agenda, there were 2 middle school students honored in the Johns Hopkins, there's a spelling error there, Johns Hopkins Talent Search. This is a search that that university has been conducting for about 15 years now of 7th and 8th grade students who elect to take the Scholastic Aptitude exams. And when they do well, if they do well in those exams, they're singled out for special awards. 2 of our students in our middle school did so. They were Peter Forche and Joel Arnold. So we certainly want to extend our accommodations to those families and to those 2 young people.
That was Joe Lee.
Joe
Lee.
Excuse me. My apologies to Joe Lee. I wrote that down wrong.
And a tuition student.
Better yet. Matter of choice, item number 2. I think maybe all the school commissioners have received a mailing about that. If not, let me tell you something about it. A program being held this coming Monday night, next Monday night at 7:30 p.m. at the high school in the theater. It's a panel discussion being moderated by Charles Nesson, a Harvard law professor. Includes a distinguished panel of outstanding speakers from around the Eastern Seaboard and the area of Rutland. Jeffrey Winberg, Angela Daughter, who's the president of Vermont NEA. Peter Cookson from Columbia University. Lorna Jimerson, president of Charlotte School Board. David Wolk, our assistant superintendent. Ellen Thompson, 93 Vermont Teacher of the Year. Susan Allen, reporter for the Associated Press. Harry Chaucer, headmaster of the Gaylor School at Middlebury. Carol Tank Day, president of Vermont PTA. And Elizabeth Sternberg of Rutland City, Rutlanders for School Choice. And the billing says even others to be announced. It's Monday, May 20th, 1996 at 7:30 p.m. And I would suggest if you really want to attend, call Vermont ETV at 1-800-639-7811 to reserve your seat. I did so myself. That would conclude the announcements tonight. Dr. Dick?
Okay, the next item is financial matters. Bob?
Yeah, I'll just stand here, that's all right. We just have some bids to award tonight. And we would recommend for miscellaneous welding equipment, for a chop saw and an inverted welder, Vermont Welding Supply Company, for a acetylene welder and 2 AC/DC welders, Marion Graves Company, and for a bandsaw, Huxon, Patterson. They are all low bidders, meeting our specifications.
Move to accept.
Second.
Mr. Sanborn moves, Mr. Moran seconds. Is there any questions or discussions of the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. New business to come before the board. Madeline.
Now, let me say, first of all, as you all know, I'm a content-driven teacher. I'm a content-driven parent. And when I got the final exam schedule in today's mail, and I saw that, for all intents and purposes, academic classes end at the end of May, I looked again at the calendar for this year. And when I look at the calendar, and I don't take out any of the snow days, and I don't take out any of the half days, students who had a day one had 79 meetings with their teachers. Students who had day two had 74 meetings with their teachers. That's opposed to the old way, when if you take out 10 days for midterms and finals, they would have 170-day meetings with their teachers. Now, I know the theory of the block schedule is that you can do 2 days in one. But in speaking to many teachers, what often happens is you get a really good discussion going on whatever your topic for the day is, and it's very hard to cut it off. And I am concerned with the amount of, I guess I'm concerned with the content that students are taught, because you cannot possibly do as much in 79 days that you can do in 170 days. You may be able to do more creative things. You may have different learning styles, better tackled. You may give students opportunities that they did not have. But I just believe that that's too big a difference. And then when I see that school actually ends, classes end this early, I need to ask the question if academically we are serving the needs of our students. Now, the students who go to the Stafford Technical Center are not on day one, day two. They are there for large blocks of times, preparing them for the fields that they're going into. And I'm concerned with, are we doing the same for those students who are going into academic, to post-secondary school. So I guess in light of that, what I would like, if the board is interested in it, is I'd like to see a comparison of achievement test scores and advanced placement scores for the 2 years prior to the block schedule and the 2 years once we started the block schedule and jam plan. I'm not asking for a comparison of SAT scores, because the SATs were recentered, and that's not going to give you an accurate representation. But I'm curious if there has been any change in how these scores have either improved or not improved. So I would be looking at the class of 93 and the 93, 94, and then 95, 96. And I know that you're not going to have these kind of scores available until July, so it's not something I'm asking for immediately. And I may be all wet here, but I just can't help but believe, just based on my experience with my own child, that there's too much that she didn't get compared to what her sister got. And does that, will that be reflected in some of these scores? And also, I guess I would like to see what their grades were in these courses. For example, if a student if students traditionally got in the 90s, how did they score on the test? So that if a kid got a 97 in a course and scored a 2 on a test, is the college that's receiving that thinking, what's going on here kind of thing. So I'm not looking for names of students. I'm just looking for, you know, maybe the top 10 in each class. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that.
Do you think there's a possibility, though, of variables here in terms of students' abilities to absorb the knowledge? And I look at my own kids, and my 9th grader right now is doing probably 4 times the work that my senior from last year did. He's probably done as much in 9th grade as the other one did in 4 years. In terms of real applied work. And what I saw him do, and I think there's a difference in the student, the drive of the student. If you had a large number of kids in, say, the class of 95 who were driven to be the valedictorian, and you had a lot of kids in the class of 94 who were driven to be in the middle of the pack, your scores are going to vary tremendously.
Well, that's...
And that's the first thing that occurs. I understand what you're saying, and understand why you would question it, but I think it's in terms of the student, and I'm finding the student that I'm currently dealing with is motivated and wanting to learn, and he sits down and reads when he comes home from school, and it's hard for me to deal with after PJ, but it's a big difference in the kid.
Well, I guess...
And I think he's getting more out of what the other one did back there.
I guess in my case, since both of them had to live with me, they were probably driven the same way. But I think that I'm not looking at the scores. I'm looking at it that way, and that's why I say look at the top 10. I don't care what class you go to in Rutland High School. I think the top 10 in Rutland High School are academically motivated. That they are achievers, whether they are academic or in their extracurricular activities. They have always really looked to achieve.
Should we be measuring a program's success based on only the top 10 of a class?
I'm not measuring, well, I use that as a sample because the numbers of students in those classes. If you want to look at, obviously, if you take AP History or AP Biology, you're going to look at those scores. It's going to be for everyone in the class. You know, 15 took it, 10 scored a 4 or a 5, and, you know, a certain percentage didn't.
But I guess I would not be convinced if let's assume the top 10 2 years ago did better than the top 10
I'm looking at
years, then we make a decision to bag block scheduling because...
I'm not looking at trying to bag block scheduling.
Well, what are you looking to do then?
I'm trying to see if there has been any change, and then go to the teachers and find out why do you attribute this change? And obviously, in an AP course, you're going to go to the numbers of students who took the course, not just the top 10. If you're looking at achievement test scores, you might just look at the top 10.
Okay, and the only thing I'm going to add is that in any 2-year period, I would submit that you're probably going to get change, and it's going to be attributed to a variety of different reasons. So I guess certainly I'm open to looking at any information you're going to gather. I just think we need to be careful as to what decisions or how we're going to make any decision to relook at block scheduling as opposed to...
Well, you're right, and maybe it's how we deliver certain kinds of courses.
David?
I was going to say, the AP bio test was administered today, so you're right, we won't get the results until after July 1st, and that's why I was going to respond to it, because we will not get the results until after July 1st. I think it's a reasonable request to look at achievement test scores and AP scores, but I think we have to keep it in balance, as Debbie just said, and perhaps look at a sample and maybe not the top 10, but as long as we look at the changes over time in the context of all other forms of learning and keeping in mind that there are different ways to measure learning besides standardized achievement.
I would suggest you also get the advice of a university psychometrician and just taking their counsel and guidance and how you can make the comparisons too. Because there are people that study that subject, testing subject. In fact, you go right to the college boards and get some help from that.
So the answer is yes. We'll respond to the...
Well, I don't know if the other board members are interested.
My sense it is an interest of enough board members to gather that information, and the assistant superintendent says it can be done, so let's do it. People comfortable with that?
Roger.
Cheryl?
Yes, I'm comfortable with gathering that kind of information and looking at it, but not only would I be interested in test scores, but I also would be interested in things like attendance figures and comparing those with previous attendance figures, dropout rates, you know, and any kind of information that can help us determine whether or not we did the right thing when we moved to block scheduling. We did the right thing for kids.
I just responded to that. Last year, I think you asked the same question, maybe not about the dropout rates, but about the attendance rate. And we showed that in the year in which we moved to block scheduling, the actual daily attendance increased from the previous year under traditional schedule to last year, which was the first year under the new block schedule. The dropout rate actually declined. Our dropout rate for 94-95 was 1.96%, which was the lowest in Vermont.
Okay, thank you. Any other new business to come before the board? Old business. Debbie.
The status of the strategic planning process. Do we have any information on that?
David Rogerson has been down here. He's been working through with, I know he's been meeting with the CAP group.
He's working on a combined document that both the board and the CAP committee worked on in terms of the mission statement. And we should have something back from him either at the next meeting or the first meeting.
Okay.
Other old business, Madeline.
Okay, I kind of touched on this earlier, and I raised it last year at this time, and you told me to think about it, or I could do it again this year. And it has to do with our guidance program. I asked last year if you would look at or consider looking at scheduling counselors 9 through 12 instead of 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. And part of my reason came from speaking to a couple of guidance counselors. But the issue for me is that if you have 4 counselors dividing the student body in quarters, you have people who know the student for 4 years, who can help them in their course selection based on their previous experience. You have teachers, you have guidance counselors who are therefore then familiar with the whole picture of the high school. And you have the senior class divided in quarters so that you don't have one counselor trying to deal with career plans or college plans for in excess of 100 students each. I don't believe it's possible to do service to 100 students or do the kind of service that counselors might like to do that way. And at the time, what you'd said to me last year was we were going to do it again this year, but it was something you were going to look at. And I just really feel it's important in a high school our size that there be one person who knows the student for the 4 years they're there. You just don't turn them over in 2 years. So I don't, and a couple of counselors have said to me that they think it would be better that way.
So noted.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get into a dialogue about it now or have it be an agenda item at another meeting.
I personally would like to have an agenda item.
I would too.
I would agree.
I don't remember you asking, but I'm glad you brought it back up.
Well, I have talked to Jim Walnick about it throughout the year and asked him to, as the guidance director, to gauge the pros and cons of both systems. And I think that when it is an agenda, I'd like to have a comment and talk to the board about it.
And in that consideration, I would just like to sort of it not be looked at the pros and cons of both systems. I think I'd like to explore what other options might be available to us because I'm never completely convinced. It feels to me like it can be broadened, the job description of the guidance counselor, or changed or readjusted or reevaluated.
Any other old business to come before the board? Anything from the policy liaison, Cheryl?
Yes, we have a committee meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, May 21st at 7 o'clock here at Longfellow School for the purpose of discussing policy number 7533, which is the Athletic and Activities Councils. In fact, some weeks ago, I distributed to the board members here at this table copies of the draft that had been developed as a result of our last meeting. And if anyone here has any concerns about that policy, then I would appreciate it if those concerns could be raised to me prior to the meeting so that I can include those viewpoints during that discussion. And that's it.
Thank you. Is there any other business to come before the board in open session? If not, I would remind the board and the public that the next regular meeting of the board will be 2 weeks from tonight on May 28th. The priority business will likely coming to closure on the budget. And I remind you, if you have questions, concerns, or additional information that you want, please contact the superintendent's office prior to that meeting. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion that following a 5-minute recess, the board adjourn to the superintendent's office for executive session to discuss personnel and contractual matters. The premature release of information regarding those issues would place this board at a substantial disadvantage in my judgment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Lindgren, approved by Moran. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The board is in recess for 5 minutes.